The courtroom was silent, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, the kind that pressed on your chest like a weight you couldn't push off. All eyes were locked on Malik Johnson, a 25-year-old from the rough side of town, sitting alone at the defense table. He was handcuffed, and his heart hammered like a drum in a war zone. Across from him, Judge Hollister sat high on the bench, his gray hair perfectly combed, his cold eyes scanning Malik like he was just another statistic. The judge's lips curved into a faint smirk as if he had already decided how this would end. Malik had been accused of a crime he didn't commit. Armed robbery. A crime that carried enough years to bury a young man's future. The prosecutor, a sharp-tongued lawyer with expensive shoes and a voice that dripped with arrogance, laid out evidence that sounded convincing to everyone in the room, everyone except Malik. Your Honor, the defendant's fingerprints were found on the cash register, and a witness identified him as the suspect, the prosecutor said, turning toward the jury with a smug grin. The crowd in the gallery murmured. To them, Malik was just another black kid who'd made a bad decision. But Malik didn't flinch. He stared straight ahead, his dark eyes calm but burning with something no one expected: determination. He had no lawyer, no fancy defense team, just his own mind and the truth. Your Honor, Malik said, his voice surprisingly clear and firm, may I speak? The courtroom shifted with curiosity. Judge Hollister leaned forward, his smirk widening. By all means, he said, his tone mocking. Entertain us. Malik stepped forward, his shoulders squared. He began dismantling the prosecutor's case piece by piece. Those fingerprints. I worked part-time at that store 3 weeks before the robbery. Of course my prints were there. He turned to the witness, an older man in the gallery. And you, sir, do you remember what color the robber's eyes were? The man hesitated, stammering. I'm not sure. It was dark. Malik nodded. Exactly. You're not sure. But you're sure enough to say it was me. A ripple of murmurs ran through the room. Judge Hollister's smile faded just slightly, but he quickly covered it with an impatient sigh. Enough, young man. This court doesn't have time for theatrics. Malik's jaw tightened. He wasn't just fighting for his freedom. He was fighting against every stereotype, every assumption that said he wasn't worth listening to. He pulled out a notebook, his own evidence. This is my work schedule from that night, he said, his voice rising with passion. I was at the community center tutoring kids when that robbery happened. There are cameras there. Check the tapes. Ask the kids. The room went quiet. Even the prosecutor blinked, caught off guard. Judge Hollister's eyes narrowed. Why wasn't this presented earlier? He demanded. Malik met his gaze without fear. Because no one asked me. Everyone assumed I was guilty the moment I walked in here. Even you, Judge Hollister. The gallery gasped. A bold move, calling out a judge, but Malik didn't stop. You see a young black man in handcuffs, and you think you already know the story. But I'm not your story. I'm mine. The tension in the room was electric. The judge, for the first time, looked unsettled. He cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. This court will recess while we verify this information, he muttered, but everyone knew the tone in the room had shifted. For the first time, Malik wasn't the one on trial, the system was. As the bailiff led Malik back to his seat, the prosecutor's face was pale. The jury whispered among themselves. It was as if they had just witnessed a storm they didn't see coming. Malik sat down, his chin lifted just enough to show that he wasn't broken. In that moment, he was more than a defendant. He was a fighter, a voice that couldn't be silenced. But just as the tension began to ease, the doors of the courtroom swung open. A tall man in a dark suit walked in, his expression unreadable. He handed a sealed envelope to the court clerk, who whispered something to the judge. Judge Hollister's face turned ashen as he read the document. Something about the way his hands trembled told everyone that this wasn't just another piece of evidence, it was something bigger, something dangerous. Malik watched, his heart pounding. Whatever was in that envelope had the power to change everything. The judge looked up, his eyes suddenly darker, sharper. We'll resume this case, he said, his voice low and strained. But there are developments. He didn't explain further. The courtroom buzzed with confusion. Malik's gut told him this wasn't over. If anything, this was just the beginning of something much larger. He felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation. Had someone else stepped in to help him? Or was this another trap? The bailiff called for order, but the tension was too thick. Malik leaned forward, whispering under his breath, "Whatever's coming, I'm ready." He had no idea that what was inside that envelope would not only prove his innocence but expose a secret that would shake the entire courthouse to its core. And just as the gavel struck to announce the recess, the judge's voice cracked, barely noticeable, but enough. Malik smiled faintly. For the first time in his life, he saw fear in the eyes of the man who once looked untouchable. What was in that envelope? And why did it make Judge Hollister tremble like a man with something to hide? The courtroom was frozen in shock, every gaze fixed on Judge Hollister's pale face. That envelope, the one slipped into his hands only moments ago, had stripped him of his usual arrogance. His fingers trembled as he folded the paper back inside. Malik could feel it, something explosive was about to erupt. "Court is in recess," Hollister announced, his voice hoarse, but it was too late. The gallery was already buzzing with whispers. The bailiff tried to quiet them, but the tension was too thick to cut. Malik sat still, his heart pounding. What could rattle a judge like that? Moments later, the prosecutor stormed out of the room, phone in hand, whispering urgently. Malik leaned back, studying every detail, every nervous glance exchanged between the judge and the prosecutor. Something was off, and it wasn't about him anymore. When the court reconvened, Hollister avoided Malik's eyes. "Before we proceed," he began, "this court has received new information. The defendant will remain silent while the court reviews." His voice trailed off, but Malik wasn't staying silent. "With all due respect, Your Honor," Malik said, standing, "I have the right to know what's in that envelope. If my life's on the line, I deserve the truth." The judge's jaw tightened. For a moment, it looked like he would shout Malik down. But then, with the eyes of the gallery on him, Hollister sighed. "Fine," he muttered. He held up the envelope and read aloud, his voice shaking. "Judge Hollister, this case is compromised. The true suspect has been arrested in a neighboring county. The fingerprints, the witness testimony, everything points to a man named Victor Hale. And there's video footage proving Malik Johnson's innocence. Cigna, District Attorney's Office." The gallery erupted. Gasps, murmurs, even shouts of outrage filled the room. Malik's eyes widened, but he didn't smile. Something in the judge's tone told him there was more, something darker hiding in plain sight. The prosecutor's face went white. He tried to object, but Hollister snapped, "Sit down." Malik's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "If you already had this evidence, why am I just hearing about it now? Why did I have to fight for my life alone?" His words landed heavy, silencing the room. The gallery turned to Hollister, expecting an answer. The judge stammered, then froze. Malik noticed it, tiny beads of sweat forming on Hollister's temple. It wasn't just shame. It was fear. Malik's mind raced. What is this judge hiding? Then it happened. A woman in the gallery, dressed in a plain gray suit, stood up. "Your Honor," she said calmly, flashing a badge. "Internal Affairs. We need to speak to you." The room fell silent again. "Internal Affairs?" The woman stepped forward. "Judge Hollister, we have reason to believe you tampered with multiple cases, including this one. We have records of a private meeting with Victor Hale 2 weeks ago. A meeting where you were paid to ensure Malik Johnson took the fall." The words hit the room like a grenade. The judge's gavel slammed down, but it was useless. The crowd erupted in chaos. Cameras flashed, phones recorded, and the prosecutor's jaw dropped. Malik's chest tightened. Paid off. All this time, he thought it was just bias. But this was corruption, blatant and cruel. Judge Hollister's voice broke. "This is absurd." But the Internal Affairs officer cut him off. "Save it. We have your bank records, Hollister. The bribe is right there." Malik felt anger boil in his veins. He thought of all the young men who never got the chance to fight back, who got swallowed by a system that saw them as disposable. He stepped forward, his voice calm but sharp as steel. "All this time, you were ready to throw away my life for a payday? How many others did you destroy? The judge's face crumbled, but Malik didn't wait for an answer. You called me a criminal. But today, the real criminal is sitting on that bench. The gallery erupted in applause and shouts of justice. Hollister was led away in handcuffs, an image so ironic it almost didn't feel real. The prosecutor tried to backpedal, apologizing, but no one listened. The crowd wasn't here for excuses. Malik stood in the middle of it all, not smiling, just breathing deeply. It wasn't victory, he felt it was survival. But as he turned to leave, the internal affairs officer stopped him. Malik, you need to hear this, she said, handing him a file. Inside were pages of documents, each one darker than the last. Evidence of a network police, judges, and lawyers trading cases like poker chips. Malik's name was one of many. His stomach turned. This wasn't over. His case was just one piece of a rotten puzzle. He looked at the officer. How deep does this go? She met his gaze. Deeper than you can imagine. But we need someone like you. Someone who's seen the inside of it. Malik swallowed hard. For a moment, he wanted to walk away, to go back to a normal life. But he couldn't. Not now. As the cameras outside the courthouse flashed, Malik faced the reporters. Today wasn't just about me. It's about every person who's ever been silenced, every kid who's been told their life doesn't matter. The system isn't broken, it was built this way. But it's time to tear it down and build something better. The crowd cheered, but Malik felt the weight of the file in his hand. The fight had just begun, but this chapter was closed. He'd won his freedom. He'd exposed a corrupt judge. And he'd given a voice to the voiceless. Lesson: sometimes, life will pin you down and call you guilty before you even speak. But truth is a weapon. And when you hold it steady, it cuts deeper than any lie. Malik walked down the courthouse steps, but as he reached the bottom, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up. A man in a dark suit rolled down the window, his voice smooth but cold. "Malik Johnson," he said, "you've made powerful enemies today. If you think this is over, you're dead wrong." Malik froze, gripping the file tighter. The SUV sped off, leaving a trail of dust and a chilling warning. He glanced at the file again, then at the crowd still chanting his name. His heart pounded, but his voice was steady as he whispered to himself, "Then let them come. I'm ready." Justice had been served today. But the war, it had just begun.